Hey everyone, great to see you all. This video will show you what to do if your car's brake pads freeze in winter. Let's get started. First off, I won't discuss why brake pads freeze. There's already a video on that topic on the channel. You can check it out. It's called Can You Use the Handbrake in Winter? In this video, I'll explain what to do if your brake pads freeze up. To start, I'll briefly explain what happens when we engage the parking brake, commonly called the handbrake. It can be either mechanical or electronic. Regardless of the type, when you pull it, you're applying the brakes on the rear wheels. You're pressing certain brake pads against the disc that the wheel rotates on. Imagine you didn't check the weather or forgot. Your brakes got wet, you drove through a puddle, and it froze overnight. You're stuck. You set the handbrake to keep the car from rolling. After a few hours in the cold, everything freezes solid. You try to start as usual, but it feels like something's holding the car back. You can release the handbrake, but if the pads are frozen, they'll stay stuck to the disc and your car won't budge an inch. So, the first and simplest thing to do if your brake pads freeze is to try starting gently. If you have a manual transmission, try using just the clutch as if you're in turtle mode. If that doesn't help and you try to move but experience vibrations, the engine stalls, yet the brake pads don't release and the wheel won't turn. Try doing this with minimal gas, just a little. If you have an automatic, it's the same process. Turn on the drive or try reverse. Release the brake, it should break free. If not, try giving it a little gas. I don't recommend using too much gas to avoid damaging the mechanisms. Sometimes it can freeze so badly that, for example, if the driver has a front-wheel drive car and presses the gas, the front wheels will spin and slip while the rear wheel just drags along stupidly. If the first option doesn't work, you can try knocking on the mechanisms, the rotor, the drums, or the calipers, but not with a metal object. Use a wooden block and tap it with a heavy object. The vibrations from the tapping may free the stuck mechanism. If that doesn't help or you don't have the necessary tools, you'll need to find a way to warm up the mechanisms. I'll say right now that I don't recommend using an open flame. Ultimately, it's up to you, but that's just my recommendations for various burners and smokers and so on. If possible, bring warm water or a hose or buckets of warm water. You can periodically water, but here's a crucial point. Right after the brake pads thaw and come loose, you need to drive to dry the mechanisms. Otherwise, you'll make it worse. You might tear off the pads and think everything's fine. You'll put it away, go home feeling accomplished, but you've barely helped. The hot water you poured will quickly freeze in cold weather, making things even worse in just half an hour. If you've used this method, yes, pour water on it, but make sure to dry it afterwards. For the mechanisms, let's continue. If you happen to have a hose with a diameter about the size of the exhaust pipe, you can insert it there as an option if it's long enough for the brakes. The exhaust is usually hot, so if you leave it for a few minutes, it might help. The brake pads might loosen up. Another option is to use a construction heat gun, like a thermal one, if possible. You can bring it out, use an extension cord, and so on. Basically, if moving back and forth doesn't work, try this. Do it several times. Don't just move in one direction. Go forward, back, but don't overdo it or you might break the mechanism. If that doesn't work, try tapping it. It helps, but only to warm up. There's no other way you can do it. You could try using various auto chemicals like de-icers, silicone lubricants, defrosters. But again, when everything's frozen solid, how do we get inside? Well, you can spray around the perimeter and the liquid will slowly start to penetrate. It's better than nothing, but still, this method isn't very effective. So if the first method doesn't work and the second one only warms it up, if you find yourself in the woods, well, that's what I mentioned at the beginning. You don't have many options. You can't do much. The only thing you have is a connection. You need to call someone, ask for help, ask people to bring something that can help you warm up. As a last resort, you can always call a tow truck to bring the car to a warm place. Yes, it might be silly or expensive, but still, there are fewer options if you find yourself stranded in a field or forest. Friends, if you suddenly end up in this unpleasant, unforeseen situation, it won't be good. The key is to not dwell on what to do if your brakes freeze. Of course, it's important to know, but the main thing is to avoid the situation altogether. So, as promised, here are a couple tips. Monitor the weather forecast. If it warms up during the day but freezes at night, either don't use the handbrake or engage it only after driving a bit to dry out the mechanisms. You can also keep wheel chocks in your trunk just in case. If you have a manual transmission, you can leave the car in gear. With an automatic, simply engage the parking brake. Your car won't roll away. Well, that's all for today. I hope you found this information useful. If I missed anything or you know other methods, please share in the comments. Subscribe to the channel and like this video for more helpful content. As always, I wish you safe travels and fewer unpleasant situations on the road. Bye for now.